Thank you very much, Secretary-General. And now over to our next speaker. Former Prime Minister Tony Blair, while in office, changed the politics of climate change by putting climate change at the top of the G8 agenda and Gleneagles in 2005, and also by inviting the +5 nations, the major developing countries, to the same table to sit down and talk about this shared common challenge. He paved the way through his government to actually have a climate bill, the first nation to put in place, and I can see Secretary of State Ed Miliband in the audience here carrying that work forwards, but the first nation to put targets into legislation and to set up a mechanism for delivering on that. And since leaving office, the Right Hon Tony Blair has been our good partner at the Climate Group and leading our joint initiative of breaking the climate deadlock to see how do we really get the deal the world needs in Copenhagen. So thank you for your leadership, and over to you.
Thanks very much indeed, Secretary-General, distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to come along and say these few words to you. I think Hugh did a brilliant job of expressing the moral imperative behind action on climate change. My task is rather different, which is to try and show how I think this could be done at the Copenhagen summit. You know, I've been out of office now for just over 2 years. There comes a point when people, after they've left office, start to see the world in very easy terms, and they forget how extremely difficult it was when they were in office actually to do some of these things. I've not been out that long yet, right? So I've still got the kind of psychology of sitting in the seat trying to take the decision. And in my view, the will is actually there amongst the international leadership. The question is, can we find the way to match the will? And that's what I'd like to address my comments to. And here's the other thing that I think is fascinating about the 12 years that have passed since Kyoto. My government was a big part of negotiating Kyoto. Kyoto was a breakthrough treaty. But Kyoto, in a way, was a treaty to make a point that climate change mattered. Copenhagen is actually the treaty that's going to make the solution. And that's very tough and very challenging. And it has to do so in circumstances where there are a lot of issues that compete for the attention of world leaders. Now, I want to offer just 4 points as to how I think that solution could be crafted. The first is that I think we have to distinguish the short term and the medium and long term. In other words, we need to set a clear interim target for the negotiation, because 2050 is a long, long way ahead. So we need to map out a path. And in the short term, there are going to be measures that we take that are actually based on technologies we know about now. Energy efficiency. Certain of the renewables that are already at the state of commercialization. And of course, deforestation. Deforestation in the short term, arresting that is going to make a substantial difference to what we need to do in order to hit any short-term interim target. So that's the first thing. Longer term, we need now to be taking the measures that will invest in the technologies of the future. Carbon capture and storage, and clean coal, next generation of solar power, electric vehicles, smart grids, next generation of nuclear power. All of these things we need to start investing in now, but it will take some time before those technologies are able to be brought to market. So the first thing is to distinguish in our minds clearly between the short term and the medium and long term. The second thing is, I personally think, and this negotiation is as intellectually complex and politically sensitive as any I can imagine, is to focus on specific plans for specific issues. Again, deforestation is one. Another is technology diffusion. Now, if we come up with technological solutions, the question will be, how do we share those and spread those? So that as the means of dealing with climate change come on stream, people in developing countries, for example, are able to apply them. And then, of course, the crucial issue of funding. How do we get measures of funding that are fair and equitable and that allow us to help some of the poorer countries in the world implement the solutions as we devise them? The third thing is that we need to mobilize the private sector as well as the public sector. The climate group is a private sector body. There's a report that Lord Stern, who's here, Nick Stern, has been an expert on this for many years, has published showing how you can mobilize some of the private sector investment behind the solutions here. The only thing, in my judgment, that will work is, yes, getting the public sector and governments to set the framework and to provide much of the support, but they need to do that in a way that provides business with a clear direction and real opportunities for the future. The fourth thing I'd say is this, and this is, again, just from someone who sat through many negotiations. And I was telling Connie, who's doing such a fantastic job, incidentally, in handling these negotiations, the Danish minister in charge of this. And it's a great challenge, but I know it's one that she's up to. But I was saying to her and some of her ministers that I went through several European Union budget negotiations. I went through NATO negotiations. I went through the Northern Ireland peace negotiations. I don't want to alarm anyone, but this, I think, is possibly more difficult than any of them. And earlier today, I just had a meeting with Senator Mitchell on the Middle East peace process. So if you take the spectrum of difficulty, this negotiation is right along towards the most difficult end of the spectrum. However, there is a way. I think there is a will. And my fourth point is very simply this. In a negotiation as difficult and complex as this, don't make the best the enemy of the good. This is not about fixating on this percentage or that percentage. It is about getting a global agreement that sets the world on a new low-carbon path to the future. The single most important thing is to get this underway. Our knowledge of science and technology is going to be transformed in the next few years. We cannot, sitting here in 2009, predict where we'll be in 5 years' time, never mind 15. So get it underway, get the world with a framework of global collaboration that allows us to develop that new low-carbon future. And the final thing is this. In the report that we published from the Climate Group today, we show that where there is a global accord and global collaboration, the costs of action on climate change come down dramatically. In other words, the key economically to making sure that our action on the environment doesn't just sustain our economy in the long term, but prevents damage to it in the short term, is to get the maximum agreement possible between the major countries and the countries of the world. So there is a will. I think also there is a way. And the task for the leaders in these next few weeks and months is to show people that the world came together in 2009, that it came together in pursuit of a cause that is morally right, but also for our economy, long term, is the only way of providing sustainable development so that the people that Hugh was talking about in Ethiopia know that they will get access to economic growth, but do so within a global context that means we protect our environment, that we safeguard our planet, and that we pass on to future generations a world that hopefully is better than the one that we have today, but at least is not worse. Thank you.